everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's time to talk about AEW Dynamite, the go-home show before Fyter Fest. Fyter Fest, of course, is not a pay-per-view this year. It's a 2-week affair. It's going to be spread out over usual Dynamite time slots over the next 2 weeks. But that means that this week was kind of the go-home show, and we got a lot of developments to talk about. But how good was the show? There's only one way to find out, and that is by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. That's right, it's time for AEW Dynamite Graded. And we start things off with a massive hoss fight. It's what you love to see in professional wrestling. I've just spy everywhere. Yes, we open the show with Luchasaurus taking on Wardlow in a Lumberjack match, with the best friends Chuck Taylor and Trent actually making an effort and dressing as Lumberjacks. Lovely stuff. There's not a lot of technical stuff in this match, and it's not what you want to see, is it? Let's be honest, from Luchasaurus and Wardlow. You want to see power moves, big strikes, surprising feats of agility from men of that size, and we got all of those things. They head up the ramp to the stage, and the Lumberjacks actually try and do their job and get them back to the ring. It goes badly for the Lumberjacks. First, Brandon Cutler goes up and tries to stop Wardlow, and Wardlow just chucks him off the ramp onto a crowd of wrestlers below. Then Marco Stunt comes along and jumps on Wardlow's back. He just hoists him in the air, gorilla presses him, and throws him upwards off the stage onto the crowd of people below. It's insane. But Luchasaurus gets a measure of revenge, kicking Wardlow, who falls off the stage onto that now rather flattened crowd of wrestlers below. And then just to top it all off, Luchasaurus stands on the edge of the stage, big shooting star press to the outside off the stage, you know what I mean? And everyone's just like a fine paste by this point. Back in the ring, and Luchasaurus potentially has the match won with a big choke slam, but MJF hops on the apron and distracts the referee. So from the other side, Jungle Boy gets in the ring, races across, and does like Big E's spear through the ropes to the outside. But that only distracts the referee further. It allows Wardlow the chance to nail a low blow on Luchasaurus, hit the F10, and pick up the dirty victory. After the match, there's a big pull-apart brawl between MJF and Wardlow and the members of Jurassic Express, and we learn via commentary that we're going to get Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus versus Wardlow and MJF at Fyter Fest. This gets an A- grade from me, a really fun opening to the show. Nothing technical really, nothing psychological, but it was very, very fun. And it felt a little bit more wild and crazy and a little bit more out of control than the WWE Lumberjack matches that we're used to. Next up, Shida versus, what's the word I use here? A job at an enhancement talent, a local. Shida versus Red Velvet. Hikaru Shida comes out and she argues with Penelope Ford at ringside. Ford slaps her and Shida is just fired up. She runs in the ring, the bell rings, big jumping knee to poor Red Velvet, big Falcon Arrow, 1, 2, 3, and Shida's won the match and immediately just goes back outside the ring, jumps into the crowd and takes on Penelope Ford. Kip Sabian tries to separate them and gets his sunglasses literally slapped off his face. He loses a lens from the sunglasses. It's very funny stuff, classic comedy. And Shida looks like a boss here. She looks like an absolute beast. This gets a B grade from me because I usually grade squash matches a little bit lower, obviously, because sometimes they're not that entertaining, but in this instance, it served the storyline very well. I wanted to give it maybe like a B+ or something, but I decided not to, just because it came directly after that pull-apart brawl at the end of the last match. So two kind of similar segments next to each other at the start of the show, but I think they were both effective to a certain degree. Now we get a previously recorded press conference between the Nightmare family, Cody specifically, but he's flanked by the rest of the Nightmare family, and also Jake Hager, but Hager isn't there. He just hasn't bothered to turn up on time. One of the press has a question for Arn Anderson, and Anderson talks about coaching Cody and what it's like, and firing him up for this title defense against Jake Hager. And it takes me, shamefully, a good like 30-40 seconds to realize that Arn is talking about Jake Hager. He keeps saying Jake, and I'm thinking, Jake Roberts, what? That feud's finished with Lance Archer, what are you talking about? And then I'm like, oh, no, Arn's not the idiot, I am. And I should have realized that a long time ago. Cody gets a question about what it means to be the first ever TNT champion, and he talks very flowingly and very poetically about what a great honor it is and what a great belt it is and what a great opportunity for so many people like Ricky Starks that it's been already in its short lineage. And then Jake Hager comes out and interrupts him mid-speech. Cody's obviously annoyed by this interruption, but he stays calm. He tries not to start a brawl. They have a stare down with the belt in the middle, and Hager jaws with Dustin, who's behind Cody, but Cody's like, come on, just let's all calm down. And then Hager's wife commits the cardinal sin. She throws her glass of water in Cody's face, and now Cody is fuming, but he still holds himself back and doesn't start a fight. This gets a B+ grade from me. It was a little bit odd, a little bit different, but sometimes AEW does slightly off-kilter things like press conferences, things that we're not used to seeing in WWE, and sometimes it does pay off. This sort of paid off. I found it quite interesting, and I especially did enjoy the contrast between the ultra-passionate Cody, you know, Mr. Wrestling, he just absolutely lives and breathes it, and then the really disrespectful Jake Hager, not even showing up on time, his wife throwing the water. It was a nice little contrast there. Before the next match, we get a little vignette, which is a bit of an odd one. It's like something from Kill Bill or something, but it's fine. Joey Janela and Sonny Kiss, who are now a tag team, of course, stop at a gas station while they're cruising around. Joey goes in to buy snacks. Sonny Kiss is outside filling up the tank, and then they get jumped by just some random hoodlums from the streets. They try to beat up Sonny Kiss, and then Janela comes out, and the good guys just absolutely take out these random street thugs. It's kind of funny, because I always find it really funny when there's a brawl in wrestling outside of the confines of an arena, but they still use wrestling moves. It just looks a bit funny to me, and I quite enjoyed it. Anyway, back to Daily's Place, and Janela and Kiss are taking on the team of Brodie Lee, Mr. Brodie Lee, and Colt Cabana, who of course is being courted by the Dark Order. Cabana starts off the match but doesn't look like his usual babyface self. He's getting really frustrated. He slams his fists on the canvas when Janela gets the better of him in a little opening exchange, but eventually Brodie comes in and evens the odds with a huge big boot to Janela. Sonny Kiss avoided that. Well done. Just stand on the apron all day. But Kiss does get involved. It develops into more of a traditional tag match for a little bit until Reynolds and Silver of the Dark Order get involved from the outside behind the referee's back. They provide a bit of interference. Cabana doesn't even realize it and almost picks up the pinfall victory, but his opponent kicks out. And Cabana just doesn't know that he's being helped out by members of the Dark Order. I really hope we're not doing the whole Sting thing, the whole like the good guy doesn't realize that his friends are evil, because they're literally called the Dark Order, and look at them. Come on, Colt, you know they're evil. They're called the Dark Order. The action spills to the outside where Brodie protects Colt from an aerial attack by Sonny Kiss. Then Janela goes for a dive through the ropes and Brodie just sort of sidesteps, watches him crash and burn, throws him back in the ring and crushes him with the discus lariat. And then we get the finish of the match, which is really interesting because Colt is still the legal man. Brodie just looks at him and presents him with Janela's unconscious body and goes, there you go, there's the pinfall, mate. And Colt's like, okay, and picks up the win and looks delighted as well. And it looks like the Dark Order's magic, like their culty magic, is working on Colt Cabana. After the match, once the Dark Order have like celebrated their way to the back, not like that, they weren't proper having like a little party with balloons and everything. No, once they've, in a sinister fashion, celebrated their way to the back, here comes Lance Archer out of the crowd, just out of nowhere, to attack the losers and beat them down for just no discernible reason until Jake the Snake is there to try and rein him in. This segment gets a B+ from me. Originally I was going to give it a B grade, but I think the storyline development pushes it into B+ territory. I enjoyed it, and also we find out about a couple of matches for Fyter Fest. A little bit later on in the night, Brodie reveals that he has challenged SCU to a 6-man at Fyter Fest between SCU and Brodie Lee, Colt Cabana and Grayson as well of the Dark Order. We also find out that we're going to get Janela versus Lance Archer. Janela, mate, I'm so sorry. Next up, it's SCU versus FTR. So many acronyms. WTF. It's SCU versus FTR. FKA The Revival, and that's happening ASAP. And they're DTF. Whoa, no. This was a banger of a match. First of all, SCU are represented by Daniels and Kazarian, no Scorpio Sky this time, and it starts off pretty technical and then descends into a bit of a brawl and pushing and shoving and fighting, and it all feels very on the edge and uber competitive. I mean, some of the double team tactics and strategies in this one, man, it was absolutely brilliant stuff, reminiscent of FTR's matches back in NXT. There was things like reversing an inside cradle attempt for your partner behind the referee's back, or holding an opponent on the top rope so they can't deliver an aerial move off it. It sounds like basic stuff, but the way they paced it, it all really made sense very well in the context of the match. And my favourite bit, I think, was when Harwood was going for a sunset flip pinfall attempt, but then his opponent grabbed his partner and like they held onto each other over the top ropes. And then Wheeler came along, like Benjamin and Haas, like the world's greatest tag team, vaulted over Harwood's shoulders to break the hold, and then Harwood, you know, managed to complete the sunset pinfall but it was only a near fall. Eventually, FTR nailed the Goodnight Express, you know, the Shadow Machine, almost out of nowhere, kind of, but it still worked because it was a really hard-fought match. They earned the win, but they also almost lost several times. And even though you kind of knew FTR were going to win, there were so many convincing near falls. After the match, Harwood gets on the mic and just cuts a great promo. He says, you know what, we may be only scratching 5'10", we may not have the athletic background that Jim Ross loves so much, but we are the baddest tag team around. But Harwood is interrupted from the side of the stage where their truck has been commandeered by the Butcher and the Blade. The Blade's got a mic as well, and he challenges FTR to an 8-man tag team match at Fyter Fest, which could absolutely steal the show. It's going to be the Butcher and the Blade and Pentagon and Phoenix taking on FTR and the Young Bucks. And after he's made the challenge, the Lucha Bros are behind FTR in the ring and attack them. They lay out Cash Wheeler with the Footstorm Cradle Piledriver thing until the Bucks run out and chase them away. And all the heels pile into the truck. They've just stolen FTR's truck and drive it away. This match gets an A grade. I mean, what a match. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was brilliant. AEW always deliver on the tag team action, and this was just the latest installment in a series of absolutely amazing tag team matches that AEW have put on throughout its very short duration. Absolutely loved it, and also I cannot wait for that match at Fyter Fest. It's probably the match actually out of everything that I'm most looking forward to. Next up, we get Brian Cage taking on Joe Cruz, who is, you know, enhancement talent, but he does a good job of bumping and selling while Brian Cage just bicep curls him. And that's not a comedic exaggeration. At one point, Cage literally does get his opponent in his arms and just pump out a few reps. If you're strong enough, then it's cool, I guess. Don't know how that feels. Cage makes short work of his opponent with the drill claw, and here comes Taz down from guest commentary and gets on the mic. Taz points out that Mox should be here, but he's not, and Cage obviously has turned up to work. It's fine, he's a heel. He's allowed to be a bit of an arse about this, because obviously it's right that Mox didn't turn up, given he was in close contact with somebody who tested positive. So I understand that, but at the same time, it was still a nasty thing to say from Taz. Taz says it's actually a good thing that Mox is sat on the couch watching this on TV, because if he was here, he'd get dealt with. Brian Cage is unsafe, and he's going to show everyone what he can do at Fyter Fest. This one only gets a C+ grade, unfortunately. I enjoyed it for what it was, but it was just a very short segment, and it was very similar to what we've seen already from Brian Cage and Taz in the build-up to this title match. They were limited, their hands were kind of tied with what they could do due to Moxie's absence. But yeah, it wasn't the best thing on the show, but it was fine for what it was. Next up, a little short segment that's worth talking about, but too short really to assign a grade to, I think. It's Dr. Britt Baker, DMD. She's ringside on the back of that truck, but she's in like the coal mine this time, like a plexiglass? She's in a transparent container, a little roofless cube. All through the show, Britt has been passing messages to Tony to read out on commentary, insulting him and various other members of the roster, and it's generally very entertaining. But then she makes the mistake of talking trash about Big Swole, and here comes Big Swole to tip trash onto Dr. Britt Baker. She gets on the roof of the truck, looks over the lid of the plexiglass container, there's no roof, remember, tips the trash in and runs off. It's not as good as last week, but it's something. It was still entertaining for what it was. Next up, it was the match that was supposed to be Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara, but obviously Sammy is now suspended without pay, so we get Matt Hardy instead taking on Santana, another member of the Inner Circle, so it kind of makes sense. Now, this wasn't the most fluid match on the show, it wasn't the best thing on the show at all, but I know that Matt Hardy's not as mobile as he once was, but you can really see that both guys were giving their best here. The match progresses kind of as you'd expect it to, with Santana using his youth and athleticism, whereas Matt's using like his comedic aggression and bashing Santana's head into things and all the broken universe stuff we know and love. Ortiz, of course, is occasionally getting involved from the outside too to help his tag partner out. But my favorite thing about this match, even though I wasn't a huge fan of it, I really did enjoy the finish. I thought it protected Santana despite, you know, everyone knowing he was going to lose. That's because I was watching this midway through and I was thinking, come on, just get to the twist of fate. We know you're going to beat him clean as a whistle. Instead, Santana nailed Matt with kind of a sit-out move, grabbed his legs for the pinfall attempt, and then on the count of two, Matt reversed that, using a bit of his experience, you see, rolling over and getting the pinfall himself. This gets a B- grade. It was fine for what it was. Obviously, they had to change the participants last minute, so I understand that as well. And I think if this was one of the weaker things on the show, then that's not a bad thing. It was still a very solid show throughout, I feel. Also, Santana and Ortiz got their heat back a little bit at the end by beating down Matt Hardy with that sock with the weapon in. I can't remember if it's coins or baseball or an apple. I don't remember. And finally, the last segment of the show, the confrontation in ring between Orange Cassidy and Chris Jericho. Jericho compares Cassidy to the "why did the chicken cross the road" joke, saying that when you first hear it, it's like, oh, that's quite good. And then the more and more times you encounter that joke, the less funny it becomes and the more annoying it is. Jericho calls Orange a disgrace to the business. He says, yes, fair play, you got yourself over on your own by being yourself, but the only reason you got over is because all these fans can relate to you. He's calling us all lazy. He's saying we're all slackers, and I don't like that. I work hard. Jericho says if Cassidy tries any of his little light kicks in their match at Fyter Fest, Jericho will beat him in 30 seconds flat. Orange takes the mic. It's like, oh, is he gonna speak? But he just puts the mic down and then just does explicitly what Jericho told him not to. The little kicks, the backup, the super kick, and Jericho's really not amused. Jericho pulls off Orange Cassidy's shades, breaks them in his hands, and tosses them aside. And now Orange Cassidy's mad. He takes Jericho down and the brawl is on. They brawl out of the ring all the way up through the crowd and eventually up to like a little platform, I think. And Orange Cassidy nails his big Superman punch, which is the best in the business. I'm really sorry, Roman. And Jericho flies off through a table. And we end the show with Orange Cassidy stood, bleeding from the ear a little bit, but triumphant over his much more experienced foe. I'm really excited for that match at Fyter Fest, but how good was this segment? I'm only going to give it a B+ grade. I know that sounds harsh. I know a lot of people loved this. I've read a bit of the online reception towards it and everyone seemed to be absolutely buzzing. I'm only going to give it a B+ grade. I liked it, but it was for me just a little bit too much of a rerun of what we saw last week. It was elevated, obviously, because there was a table involved and the brawl spilled out of the ring, but I think had Orange Cassidy not attacked Jericho last week and saved all that aggression for this week, it would have been far more effective. But that's just what I think. I still enjoyed it for what it was, and it was an enjoyable, end to the show. B+ is the grade. Now let's see how good the show was overall. I'm also going to give the show a B+ grade. At first half of the show, first sort of 2/3, I thought we're heading for a very, very good episode here. I loved the Lumberjack match at the start, and that tag team match between FTR and SCU was absolutely amazing. But there were certain things on this show that I feel dragged it down to a B+ grade, and the reason is, apart from me loving to give Dynamite a B+, is that quite a lot of the show was taken up with developing things heading into the next 2 weeks of Fyter Fest, which I totally understand. And you know what? I'm not mad about it. If this show is going to be of a slightly lesser quality, slightly less fireworks, because we're going to save all the fireworks for the next 2 weeks, then I'm all for it. I think that's a good sacrifice, a good decision to make, and it's how wrestling should be booked. So B+ is the grade, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Thanks very much for watching. That was AEW Dynamite graded for this week. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com. Let me know what you thought about any parts of the show in the comment section down below. Keep yourself safe out there, stay positive, and I'll see you very soon.